you that legendary skateboarder Tony Hawk is here. Thank you.
Tony, motherfucking Hawk. All right.
I have a foundation for public skate parks. I mean, it's definitely my proudest work. We give them the roadmap and funding to do it.
Tony Hawk's Vert Alert.
It is its own discipline, and we need to celebrate that.
I'm talking about you two, of course. Please welcome to NAC, Tony Hawk.
Hello, hello, how is everyone? Good morning. Sorry about the early morning in Vegas. I know that's not optimal, but here we are. My name is Tony Hawk, and I am 54 years old, soon to be 55, and I'm a professional skateboarder, and you did not just walk into a self-help group for Peter Pan syndrome. That is truly my career and my life, and has been for a long time. I've been skating for 45 years now, and it's the best. It's been the most rewarding. It's been the craziest journey, and in some ways the most painful. But I embraced all of it. So I'll tell you a little bit how I started. First, I started skating because my older brother was a surfer. It was the 70s. Skating was kind of a fad. It was like a new toy, almost like a frisbee or the hula hoop. And my brother was surfing, so he skated by extension of that. And one day, he was skating with his friends in the back in the alley, and he had his old board. And I stepped on the board. I said, "Can I ride it?" He said, "Sure." And then I went down the alley and I said, "How do I turn? How do I turn? How do I turn?" And then I ran into the fence, and I got splinters in my fingers, and the clouds didn't part. There was no singing. It was very much like, this is hard. How do you do this? And then he yelled at me, "You gotta lean!" So I learned how to turn my first day. That was about it. And not long after that, I got to go to a skate park for the first time. By then, I figured out how to turn and actually move around and do some stuff on my own. And I went to the local skate park. I grew up in San Diego. It was called Oasis Skate Park. And I remember walking into the place, and there was all these empty swimming pools and different reservoirs and snake runs and things. And I felt this energy. I saw people flying around. There was this new music that I never heard. There was a sense of community, and I wanted to be part of it. I was really young, really intimidated, but at the same time, I was totally enthralled by it. And I made it my mission to try to go there as much as I could. It was kind of tricky. Both my parents worked. My brother was in college by then, so he would drive once a week down from Santa Barbara to San Diego and take me to the skate park, and that was like my weekend every Thursday. And I went to the park, and I started figuring out how to ride the pools and stuff, but I was really small, so it was hard for me to generate speed. It was hard for me to learn the tricks I saw in the magazines, because all the people in the magazines seemed like men, even though they were only a few years older than me. But they were bigger and they were stronger, and it looked like they were daredevils. But I started to develop a way to do it on my own. And then at some point I started figuring out how to maneuver my skateboard under my feet. And I actually learned a trick that it's now called a backside varial, but I learned a trick where I would reach down between my legs, grab my skateboard, and then go up the wall and turn my skateboard around 180 under my feet. I remember vividly learning that in one of the back bowls at Oasis Skate Park. No one was around, no one would have cared, but the feeling I got from it was something that I can't explain. It was like the high that I had been chasing. and I just continued to chase the rest up till now. The idea that I created something new, like it had never been done, it was, to me, something that I thought maybe wasn't even possible. And I know I'm making a big deal about this. It really, if you saw it on video, you'd think like, so what? But to me, it was the spark, and it was what drove me to want to do that going forward. And not long after, I was playing baseball, I was playing basketball, I was playing Little League, and my mom came to get me from the skate park to go to Little League practice, which my dad was the coach of the team and the president of the Little League in our neighborhood. That he was appointed that year, and I reluctantly went to practice. I still had my skate pads on. I don't know if that was like subconscious, but I think it was me trying to send a message. And I told my dad that I didn't want to play baseball anymore. So that was awkward. And he was supportive. I was very lucky. He actually did support me in that decision. He finished out the season as the Little League coach and president, and I was off and running. I was skating nonstop. But what I found is that even though skateboarding was this small community, and I didn't realize it was shrinking further as I got into it, it was very much rooted in this, like, the Dogtown and Z-Boys. You had to be cool, you had to be hardcore, you had to be stylish, and I was super skinny, I was very small. I was doing these weird tricks with my skateboard. I would enter competitions, but I wouldn't really place well because I couldn't get the speed or the height that they were looking for from the more advanced skaters. And so I figured out a way for me to get airborne that it was not the usual or the tested and true method of doing it. Whenever people would do aerials out of pools, they would reach down and grab their board before they got to the top, and then they would jump with their board like it was more like a leap, like an actual just hop. And I didn't have the strength to get that speed to do that. And so I figured out that if I can launch off the top of these bowls without grabbing the board and wait till I'm in the air to grab it, then I'll be able to actually get airborne without having to reach down and kill my speed. I didn't think I was creating a new movement. It was total desperation. I just wanted to get in the air. And I figured that out, and that led me to figure out how to do all these tricks that I was doing below the top of the bowls, up in the air. And like I said, when I started doing that, people thought that I was cheating. They said, "Oh, Tony Hawk, he cheats because he just ollies into his air, so then he can just grab it any which way." And I was like, "Isn't that good? I thought that's good to do different types of airs." But I think that when I look back, that was my game-changing moment because I was creating a new style and a new movement of how to do these tricks and to have more control, to have more speed, to have more air time. So I started doing these kind of tricks. I started getting some coverage, like I started doing a little better in competition. And I remember probably my moment of validation came. I got sponsored. Well, I got sponsored. Sponsored basically meant that you got free gear from a skate company. I was sponsored by Dogtown Independent. I got free gear sometimes, so I was kind of sponsored. And my hero at the time was a guy named Eddie Alguera. He was the inventor of a lot of moves back then. But most famously, he was known for a trick called a frontside rock and roll, which is basically you rock your board on top of the bowl and you come in the frontside direction, which makes it actually harder than backside. I won't get into all the minutiae of that, but I had to learn frontside rocks because Eddie Alguera did it. That was his signature trick, and I could do them pretty well by the time I was sponsored. In fact, sometimes they would bump me up a class in the divisions because they said, "Well, that kid can do frontside rocks." I'm like, "Yeah, but he doesn't do much else." He goes, "Yeah, but he does frontside rocks." So put him in the top division. So I was at one of my first sponsored amateur events. It was at Marina Del Rey. That's where famously Dogtown Z-Boys are from. And I did my routine, and then I fell near the end of my run. I ran back up the bowl, and I did a trick that I had created right around that time that was actually a variation of a frontside rock. You come up backwards, and you swing one way into a rock and roll, and you swing back to a frontside rock. If you need the title, would be half cab frontside rock. But I did that, and I remember hearing kind of a buzz, like, whoa, what was that? And as I was leaving, I didn't do well in the competition. That didn't save me from my fall. But as I was leaving the park, I saw Eddie Alguera in a little bowl trying to learn my trick. And in that moment, I felt seen, I felt noticed. I can't explain it. And he didn't think I was watching him. I think he was kind of embarrassed that he was trying to learn some little kid's trick. But that definitely gave me something I needed, because I felt very out of place. It was weird. I was skateboarding is like an outcast activity already. You're marked if you're a skateboarder. Back then, it was very uncool to be doing it, especially in school, especially around girls. So I'm already an outcast in my peer group, and then now I'm an outcast in this outcast activity. So I felt very isolated, and I was trying to learn all these moves, and then I saw Eddie Alguera try my trick, and I was like, that's something. So that gave me motivation to keep going. I would say not long after that, I started rising through the amateur ranks. I started developing my style more. I started getting more air, and then I was still I was very intimidated. In fact, at one point, I was at an event, and there were a couple of pros skating a different bowl in the back of this one park, and I kind of sidled up to them because no one else was around, and I wanted to be part of the scene. And I kind of got close to them as if I was skating with them, and they were joking about something, and so I just sort of snickered, laughed as if I was in on the joke, and one of them turned to me, and he spit at my skateboard, and he said, "This is punk rock, kid." And I guess that meant that I wasn't invited to the party. And that was obviously crushing, but at the same time, I did have friends my age that I was skating with, so it wasn't like that was the ultimate blow. But fast forward to this event, there was a big event at another park. A lot of my peers were turning pro because we had all reached the top of the amateur ranks, and it was kind of like, if you're going to stay amateur at this event, then you're not pushing yourself. You're kind of phoning it in. And so I was filling out the entry form. By then I was sponsored by the Bones Brigade, Paul Peralta, and I'm filling out the entry form, and Stacy Peralta, who put me on the team, he's looking over my shoulder, and I'm filling out name, address, sponsors, and then there's a box that says pro, and there's a box that says am. And then I looked up at Stacy, and he said, "It's up to you. What do you want to do?" And then so I ticked the pro box, and then I was a pro skater. That was it. There was no contract. There was no celebration. I was 14, and now I'm competing with 18 and 20-year-olds, and we are competing for a first place prize money of $100, $75 for second, $50 for third. I got fourth. But I did beat the guy who spit on me. He got fifth. So that was exciting. And then I kind of got a boost of confidence because I was in the pro leagues, and so then I started to develop my style more. I started learning more tricks, which was still hard because even I would win an event, and then Thrasher magazine would say, "Oh, here's Tony Hawk, the circus freak." Like, what? Why can't I just be accepted? Because they said I was doing circus tricks, or they said like I was doing baton twirls, whatever. I kept on, and then I started doing very well in the competitions. Suddenly, I was winning a lot of the events. I started to get more strength. I started to grow, and then I found myself at age 17 with a decent income from board royalties, from competitions, and I ended up. My dad was worried that I was making all this money, and I didn't you got to put it away. I was like, I wasn't making a ton of money, but I was definitely making more than my high school teachers, which to me was a ton. And so he said, I want you to invest your money, or you should probably maybe just buy a real estate, buy a house. So he co-signed a house. He co-signed a mortgage for me while I was a senior in high school. So I owned a house at age 17 while still in high school. And when you talk about high school and you think of like all the parties you went to, and it was like, oh, so-and-so's, their parents are out of town, we're going to their house. My parents were always out of town. So my house was always the party house. So it was difficult to stay focused on school at the time, but I did. I managed to graduate, not with honors, but I did make it through. And then I was off and running. I mean, literally from the moment I graduated high school, the next month I was living in North Hollywood working on a movie called Gleaming the Cube. Like, it was wild. You don't have to clap for Gleaming the Cube if you've seen it. No, I'm just kidding. It was wild. All of a sudden it was like just shot into space. And I kept doing really well in the competitions. Suddenly it was more like I was expected to win these events, and if I wasn't winning, then that was unacceptable in terms of sponsorships, in terms of fans. And it was like, how did you do at that event? Oh, I got second. Like, oh, you lost. I got lost? I thought I did pretty well. And that pressure kept mounting the better I did. And so when people think, oh, you must have been on top of the world, you're winning, to me it was just draining. It really took a big toll on my mental health. It started to suck the fun out of skating, and that's the only reason I ever did it, because it was so much fun. And I had to go and tell Stacy Peralta that I want to stop competing. And I remember that conversation did not go well, because at the time, the only way you could get recognized in skateboarding was to compete. That's the only reason that anyone's putting you in the magazines. That's the only reason people want to buy your skateboard with a name on it. And I told him, like, I'm just not having fun with it. And he said, well, I don't know how you're going to make a career of that. So I shied away from competing, but I kept skating, and actually my skating improved tenfold because I wasn't under that pressure of sort of conservative skating that I had to stay on. I was free to just try anything. And I developed probably the most amount of tricks in that time. And then I decided to come back to competition because I missed the camaraderie of it. And but I came with a new attitude that was very much like, I don't mind not winning. I'd rather just try everything and make it all or nothing. And so I went with that attitude. It was way more fun. I didn't win every single event, but I just was enjoying myself. And the irony of that is when I dove into competition, finally got really good at it, enjoying it, is right when skateboarding just took a dive in terms of popularity. So suddenly it was like, I'm back, and where's the crowd? What happened? No one's here. Where are the events? And all of a sudden, skating, because of a variety of reasons, skating started to die in popularity. I would say mostly because, well, for one, it was sort of a fad, a cycle. But also, most of the skate parks were private, and they couldn't afford liability insurance anymore. So they just started closing up left and right. I got very lucky that I lived near one of the last parks that remained open, but for the most part, it was kind of dead, and skating sort of took to the streets. I mean, that's literally how street skating started, was that we were trying to find places to go. There were no more parks, there were no designated places, and so we had to use the urban landscape to make our skate park. And that is exactly why you see skateboarding is not a crime, why skaters are considered outcasts. It's because it was more out of desperation for a place to ride than being rebellious. I mean, there's a rebellious side for sure, but at the same time, that combined with people just wanting a place to do it, it gave skateboarding a really bad stigma. I did what any I did what any smart person would do at the time when my career was fading, when my income was shrinking by half every month because it was based on royalties. I sold I bought another house, I refinanced it, and I started a skateboard company. I don't know, I think for me I thought that was my exit from being a professional skateboarder and my entry to curating a team and doing something different aesthetically, making videos. I became the marketing director, I became the video editor, I was the tour manager, I was the ambassador for the brand, and I think it was more that I believed I was going to be more behind the scenes and that skateboarding was going to rise again. That's what I believed, because I had seen it come and go twice in my lifetime already. I was considered old. I was a vert skater, so that was already like that was not cool. I was 24, and it was like I'm done. I remember making the list of Big Brother Skate Magazine had a washed up list, and my name was near the top of it in those years. And so I embraced that, and I said, okay, I'm going to start this company. And I was doing all these things. I was wearing all these hats for the company, and at some point, my partner in the company said, "You're more effective being out there skating than you are being at this desk." And what he wasn't saying was, "Your ads kind of suck. Your marketing's not great, but we would rather see you skating anyway." So I kind of jumped back into the skate scene. I was competing, doing things, and then I heard about this new event that ESPN was going to do called the Extreme Games. And they said, we're going to do an event that includes skateboarding, but all of the other extreme sports. That was the first time I ever heard the word extreme, so I didn't really understand what that meant. But in their eyes, it was skateboarding, BMX, rollerblading, sky surfing, bungee jumping, rock climbing, eco challenge. It was all over the place. And a lot of skaters thought, this is lame, we're not doing this. And I thought, well, this will bring skateboarding to a new audience, and I feel like we can rise above the noise because we've already been around, like we've already developed what skateboarding is. It's not like we're some new sport trying to get the attention. And so I leaned into it. They were highlighting me, obviously, because I had done so well in competition before that. And the first X Games happened, and it was kind of weird. It was all over the place. But I feel like the home audience saw something, especially in skateboarding and BMX, that they thought, this stands out. And through those years, things started to rise again. There was more sponsorship opportunities. More mainstream brands were getting into skateboarding. That rubbed people the wrong way too. But at some point, we were able to sort of control the narrative of what they expected from us, because a lot of the companies would be saying things like, we just want you to, the hairdos and the graphics and radical, gnarly. And it's like, that's not what it's about. But through working with them, we were able to sort of turn that corner and show it more for the authenticity. And I would say my best example of that was being able to work on a video game. And I can tell you that story, how it started. I was trying to get a game going with a PC programmer. He had a very crude engine of a skateboarder that sort of went through bowls, and it was hard to control, and it was on a keyboard, but there was something there, and there had been no video game for skateboarding since 720 stand-up arcade game. Shout out 720. And so he and I started pitching all these different console manufacturers and publishing companies, and came up against so much flack. It was more like, why skateboarding is not even popular? Why would anyone want to play a video game with skateboarding? And we go, because it's fun and you can do all these tricks, and never mind. So he gave up. Luckily, because I'd been to all those meetings, my name was sort of in the ether of the video game industry. And Activision called me one day and they said, hey, we heard you're trying to do a video game. I was like, well, I was yeah, I was. And they said, well, we are doing a video game and we'd like you to see what we're working on. So I went to Activision Santa Monica, dressed much more casually than this, and walked into a boardroom of all these people in suits with a PlayStation on the table. And they said, well, we developed a game called Apocalypse. It stars Bruce Willis. It was the first game to have a celebrity voice and likeness. And they said the game didn't do well, but the engine lends itself perfectly to skateboarding. So they hand me the PlayStation controller, they turn on the TV, and there is Bruce Willis with a gun on his back on a skateboard. In a wasteland. And I started playing it, and immediately I started doing tricks. I started doing kickflips and 360s and grabs, and the controls were intuitive. And I thought, this is it. This could be something really special. I signed on immediately. I thought with my resources and with my help with the programmers, we could do something that represents skateboarding authentically and would be fun for skateboarders to play. That was my only goal for the game, was that it would inspire an actual skateboarder to buy a PlayStation. Fast forward to about a year and a half later, and the game is about to come out. I'm at the X Games. It's 1999. I kind of knew that would be my last year of competing. I had been competing at that point in my life for 20 years, and I knew I wanted to explore other opportunities, and I didn't want the pressure of the competition. And during the Best Trick event, I had a couple of tricks in mind that I got done very early in the event, and I had been trying 900s for probably the last 10 years of my life, off and on. I got really close a couple times. I broke a couple ribs. I threw out my back, and at some point I kind of gave it up because it was taking too much out of me when I would try to make it. And because I had done what to me was my best trick early on in the event, I still had about 10 minutes to run out the clock. And I remember the on-site announcer, Dave Duncan, who goes to all the events, he's like, "Hey, Tony, let's see one of those 900s. I was like, "Dude, I've never made it, but why not try it?" And it was more like, I'm going to show the crowd what this looks like, because I'd gotten really close before. And so I tried a couple, and then probably about the third attempt, I realized that suddenly I have the right amount of speed every time. I have the right takeoff every time, and that had never happened. Usually when I was trying it, all the ramps that we had were terrible. So one wall was good, one wall was okay. You can never rely on the speed of it. You didn't really know if you're taking off in the right place, because this part of the wall is different than this part. And so I only got like 4 or 5 good attempts every time I would try it. And this time, my attempts were consistent because the ramps were finally built, because we had ESPN's budget to build something. And so I started trying it, and suddenly I started spotting the landing, and that was rare for me to actually see my landing zone. Usually I was going at it blind and just hoping, just Hail Mary, which didn't work, obviously. And then around the 6th or 7th attempt, I thought, you know what, if I'm ever going to try to make this again, it would be now, because why not? I don't mind getting hurt in this venue or in this scenario. And so I threw one down on the wall, and I fell forward, which is exactly how I got hurt the last time I tried it, breaking the rib right here. And I bounced, and I was okay. And it was like, sweet, I got another try. And so something in my head clicked that you got to figure out how to shift your weight back in mid-spin so that you don't fall forward when you land. And I had never had that clarity before, because I just didn't have these opportunities or that amount of attempts. So by then, and I know this in hindsight, but I was so focused on the task at hand that I didn't realize the time was up. And I thought that if the time was up, they cut the feed. I didn't really care. Like, I just wanted to make this trick finally. And I thought, well, I'm just doing this, so I want to make it. And the crowd that was there live was definitely behind me. So the next attempt I shifted my weight mid-spin, and then when I landed, I actually fell backwards. And that was the tipping point, literally and figuratively, because I realized that if I just split the difference, then I can stay standing. And that's what I did. And then the next thing I know, I'm riding up the next wall, and it was like, that's it? I did it? And I kind of didn't believe it. Like, I really thought, like, I couldn't have just done that. And as I looked up at my peers and all my competitors, they're rushing me to the ramp, and I was like, oh yeah, I did it. Yeah, that's what that means. And it was huge for me. I mean, it was definitely my best moment of competition. In the grand scheme of things, it was just another skate trick that got invented. It was a milestone that we had been working towards, and there were about 5 of us that had been trying it all in those years. And but because people saw that, and what I found out later is that ESPN just kept the feed going. They just kept the live event happening. And that inspired a lot of kids to start skating, because they saw something different. They saw what we go through and that we love it authentically. We're not doing it for the money. There was no money. Like, I didn't, the prize for that, I don't know, it was a couple $1,000s maybe. It really wasn't some great accolade that I was going for. I just wanted to do it, and I think that what kids saw in that moment was something that was more akin to passion, and that they saw what we've been doing for decades, right there, front and center. And so I know I got off track, but what I was trying to say is I knew the next day that I had to tell the video game designers that I did this trick, and they better include it in the game that's coming out, because I think people are going to expect it. And I emailed the president of Neversoft, Joel, who's amazing, and I said, hey, I did this trick last night, and I think you guys should probably try to figure out how to get in the game. But they were already in beta. They were already submitting the game to the console manufacturers. You don't get to change the game when you're at that stage. But they had not quite submitted it yet, and I got an email back right away, and he said, way ahead of you, you fucking rule. So he saw it. And they did. They included the 900 in the game, right down circle. The game came out a couple months later. I mean, there's all these other narratives that somehow this is all my big plan. I wish I could. I would be an amazing mastermind if I could have planned all that. It was just the perfect storm of things happening, and I felt very lucky when the game came out. It was a big success critically. As soon as it came out, they started to work on the second one, and I was like, are you sure we're doing a sequel? And I remember Joel like, we're gonna do a sequel. Like, they haven't greenlit it, but we're doing it for sure. And then we got to do a sequel. We got to do several sequels. It was like $1 billion franchise for Activision. It definitely changed my life completely, not just financially, but in terms of recognition. I'm sure many of you know my name just from video games. In fact, it got so crazy in those days that some kids only knew my name as a video game. And I remember seeing, I was here in Vegas actually, and we were at a restaurant, and this woman came up to me and she goes, are you Tony Hawk? I said, yeah. She goes, someone told me that, and my kid thinks that you're named after the video game. I was like, works for me. I'm proud of it. So through those years, I got sort of the best exit from competition that I could have ever asked for. Then I started a tour because we had such a buzz with our sports, skateboarding, BMX, motocross, that I started an arena tour with highlighting those sports, but also having the music of our culture, live bands, and we created this basically circus of action sports that toured for almost 10 years in different versions. The ramp that we built for that is the ramp that I still skate to this day. It is definitely the best thing I ever bought in my life. And through all of that success, I started to see, obviously, the interest in skateboarding and our sports growing at an exponential rate, but with a serious lack of facilities. And I think that probably the most telling version of that was I got invited to a skate park opening outside of a big city in an affluent area, and the city council was very proud of themselves because they're cool, they're hip, we built a skate park, they're all these old dudes. And I came to town the night before the opening, and they said, do you want to go to the skate park and get a sneak preview of it, because we haven't let anyone ride it yet. Yeah, it's awesome. So they went, they had their car headlights lighting the park for me, and I started skating around, and it was terrible. Like, it was really bad. It was not designed by a skater. There's just no way. I think it was designed by maybe a sidewalk contractor that had seen old skate video games and decided he's going to emulate that. And so I'm skating it, and I'm trying to do my best, and then I get over to the fence, and they're looking at me like, what do you think? What do you think? And I said, it's bad. It's really bad. It's probably, like, the mall parking lot's probably more fun for the kids to skate. I said, man, that's what all the kids were saying when we were building it, but we said, wait till Tony Hawk gets here and he'll show you how to ride it. And I thought in that moment, you're not even listening to the constituents or the kids that are going to use this. You're just doing it because you're trying to feed your own ego. And I thought, if there's any way I can affect change with this, I would rather be a sort of mentor or a bridge to cities that are trying to get skate parks and the kids that are using them. And that was the moment that I decided to start a foundation. And it was called the Tony Hawk Foundation originally. It's now called the Skate Park Project. And we try to focus more on underserved areas. To date, we've helped to open over 700 skate parks. And it's definitely my proudest work. And those parks are much better than the one that I skated in Chicago, I promise you. But also, I think that skateboarding is unique because if you go to a skate park right now, it's going to be full of skaters from all walks of life, all ages, all races, all genders. And they're all, even though it's an individual pursuit, they're all supporting each other. And it's like you can see it all over the place. You see some kid, and they're going to drop in for the first time. And everyone gets around and like, come on, you can do it. And then they do it, and everyone cheers. And I just feel like you can't. And in those same facilities, there's top pros. See, I don't know any other sport that's like that, where you could go to a local court or a local field and see such a range of people, including the best of that field, all enjoying it together. So that's what I'm most proud of in terms of how far skateboarding has come, how inclusive it is. I mean, it's in the Olympics now. We have men and women on equal platforms, and it's been amazing. And you know, I'm thankful. Like I got to go to Tokyo when it was COVID. It was impossible to get there. Kids couldn't have their parents there, the competing athletes. And I got to go just because they knew my name. And I remember they were doing the street event over here. They had the park event over here. The park event hadn't started yet. The athletes were not there yet to practice. And I found myself in this empty skate park with my skateboard. And so I dropped in. I got to be the first one to ride the Olympic park without permission. It was pretty cool. But then I went over to the street course and I started following skaters around with my phone because I wanted to get some exclusive clips. And I remember the announcer coming over the loudspeaker and saying, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Tony Hawk, will you please get off the course? Yes, okay, sorry. Because NBC didn't want me poaching their footage. I get it, it's fine. So I would say, you know, where does this all lead to? It's been a wild ride. I'm still so thankful to be doing it. And a lot of people ask me, like, how old can you be to still be relevant or still be considered a pro? And if you had asked me that a year and a half ago, I'd have been, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And then in March of last year, I fucked around and found out. I was doing a McTwist, a trick I've done thousands and thousands of times. I didn't have enough speed, but that was never a problem for me. I could usually just ball it up, suck it up, and spin faster. And next thing I know, my board is not under my feet. My leg is pointing sideways, and I'm sliding down the ramp. What just happened? Well, you broke your femur. And my first instinct was to grab it and put it back in the right place. I don't know, I was desperate. What can I say? And I put it back in my place, and I looked up, and my friend Kevin is here. And I looked up at Kevin, and I said, I broke my leg. He's like, yeah. Sure. I went and got it fixed. I was so in denial of the severity of the injury that I started skating as soon as I could start walking. I wasn't walking well. My bone was not attached. It was just sort of hovering above itself with a nail holding it together. And I started skating way too soon. I ended up making the bone off center, and then as I kept skating, it just kept moving further away. I didn't really know this because I wasn't checking on it, but at some point, I was 8 months into my recovery. I was walking with a severe limp. It hurt all the time. My skating was not improving, and I thought, this is not right. I went and got x-rays, and it showed that my bone was still disconnected. I had a non-union fracture for all those in the medical field. And I had to get it realigned. I had to have surgery again. So November of last year, I got my leg realigned, my bones pretty much forced back in place, and I did not skate. I just hung out for about 2.5 months, 3 months, until I had verification that the bone had actually connected back to itself, and then I started skating again, but much more methodically, much more careful, and I can honestly say that I'm pretty much back to where I was. I created a new trick last week, which is, thank you. I'm going to the X Games in 2 weeks in Chiba, Tokyo. I will be entering the best trick event. There will be no 900s, but I'm gonna try to see if I still have something up my sleeve. So I guess the answer is, how much longer or how long can you do this? I'm probably the litmus test for that, and I'll let you know, but for now, I'm just having a blast, and I'm so thankful to be back on my skateboard at a level that I'm comfortable with, that I'm proud of. And I feel like if I'm not improving my skills, then I won't be doing it in public, but I'll still be skating. You can't, if I can stand on my own 2 feet, then there'll probably be wheels under it. But other than that, I'm just so thankful to still be here, to still be considered relevant at my age. I never imagined that anyone would pay me to ride my skateboard, ever, let alone pay me to talk about skateboarding, ever. So this whole thing has been, was this the dream? We couldn't have dreamt this. So we're just kind of making it up as we go along, and I'm glad to still be in the mix, and I just want to thank BMW for having me. And also for, I was, a few years ago, I was an ambassador of Mini, as you can see right here. I came up with this idea kind of on the fly. I said, what if you had a Mini jump, a Mini driving at the ramp and I'm jumping? Everyone I worked with hated the idea. But I knew we could work it out, and I got a couple stuntmen, and we figured it out. That obviously the ramp was a breakaway ramp, but it was super fun, and I'm thankful for those years. So I want to thank anyone from Mini BMW for including me, and hey, good luck in the future, and do a kickflip. Thank you.
Do a kickflip.
Just kidding. I mean, if you haven't watched, there is an HBO documentary. It's called, I think it's called Until the Wheels Fall Off. If you haven't watched that, watch that movie about Tony Hawk. And there is one thing that's still stuck in my mind. There is one of his peers asked, what sets him apart from all the others? And he said, intense determination. And if you watch that, and what also Tony talked about, I mean, he reinvented not only himself, he invented so many tricks, and about being innovative. Literally for him it means